Mabiyayang gabi sa bawat isa muli. Nais kong simulan itong kasunod na video tungkol sa balanced spirituality. Pupunta ako ngayon sa aking PowerPoint. Napansin ko kasi meron tayong pwedeng gamitin dito para sa ating pagsimula. Kung natuloy ito sa ating klase, meron akong isang sipi mula sa Ebanghelyo ni San Juan. Patungkol ito sa religious conversion. So, nung unang video kasi parang binigyan kong diin yung pangkalahatang pag-unawa sa religious conversion. I emphasized that whole dynamic of getting in touch with deeper truer self. But of course, sa Kristiyanang pag-unawa, sabi ko, ano ba yung religious conversion? Ito yung pagpapalalim ng ating ugnayan sa Panginoon na tinutulungan tayong maging malay sa banal na presensya ng Diyos sa ating buhay, sa tawag na mamuhay ayon sa kanyang espiritu, yung buong kamalayang ganyan. Very quickly, I would have used this in class and talked about it a little bit more, but there's this very beautiful passage from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, where Jesus says, he uses the image of the vine and the branches. And he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. So this is really Jesus' invitation to us. And these words, of course, come from the Last Supper. So these words from the Gospel of John record the words of Jesus when he gathers his friends before he offers his life on Good Friday. Anyway, siguro that's a good way to start our video now. Parang we ask the Lord for the grace to grow in our relationship with Him. And in the midst of the crisis today, in the name of the Lord, we pray for one another. We pray for, once again, all who have suffered because of this crisis. In a special way, we pray for our health workers. We pray for all those in our communities, who, because of the ECQ, have lost their livelihoods, and perhaps quite a number are hungry even this evening as we as I prepare this video for the class. Sige. Okay, so punta tayo dun sa ating pag-uusapan sa video ito. This is once again my outline. Wait, I have to take out this stop share. It doesn't want to get out. Yeah, anyway, sige. I don't know how to get this thing out. Excuse me, let me just try to fix this up a little. Okay, anyway, let me continue now. So this is my outline, and if you recall, in my part 1, my video on the balanced spirituality part 1, I began by going through the 3 dimensions of a balanced spirituality, and then I talked about religious conversion. So for this video this evening, I'd like to talk about political conversion. All right, if you recall, let me go now to my next slide. Dito, this is the 3rd dimension of liberation spirituality, and bringing together our readings, and the extra notes I have in my handout 6. So this is political conversion according to Dore, lighting the candle of solidarity, and meta-personal dimension of the 3rd column in that frame of Father Tanseco. And then ito mahalaga, di ba? Sabi natin, that whole article number 10, no, where McVery talks about feet, head, heart. I mentioned in the previous video, no, I would put this whole frame here. No? This is all about political conversion. So lahat ng mga frame na ito, ang tuon ng pagbabago ay pagbabago sa ating pakikilahok, no, sa mga balangkas ng lipunan. At yung pagbabago mismo sa mga balangkas na ito, no, at yung ating ugnayan sa ating kapwa-tao, no, na ang namamagitan dito sa ugnayan na ito yung mga balangkas na ito. Okay. So what I'd like to do in discussing political conversion, I would actually like to focus on that article of McVery, no, and his frame of conversion to justice. All right. So what I'd like to do, in fact, is I'd like to go back to that discussion exercise that we did, no? In particular to question A.1, no, of that discussion exercise on readings 10, 11, and 12, where that question was about the article, and I asked you, what are your points of agreement and your points of disagreement, no, to the article of McVery. I'd like to talk about actually points of agreement and points of disagreement, no, in discussing the article. But before I go to the frame I'd like to use, no, I actually endeavored to sort of sum up, no, what you had written, no, the outputs of the groups. And I have here a sheet where, I sort of tried to outline the answers to the various questions. So in terms of, for example, can I just go through my sort of quick summary, no, of the outputs of the groups? So halimbawa dito, no, when I asked you about points of agreement, I'm looking at my matrix here. Maraming nagsabi in that whole notion of social sin, no? Recognizing the reality of social sins, how our actions and decisions are interconnected and produce, this reality where the poor are marginalized. So maraming nagsabi nito, no? Recognition of structural sin, how decisions which affect the poor are made by those who have no idea of the difficulties they face, etc. No? So the whole notion of structural sin, right? And then at many points also people agreed with, for example, the whole process of conversion, no, that begins with conversion of the feet. So people would say, I just pick up some words, no? The need to step out of our comfort zones, the need to immerse ourselves, sharing the experiences of the poor, being one with those who are poor. So people appreciated the value of that. No, ano pa? Perhaps a last prominent one. No? There were actually two groups that mentioned this. Conversion is a continuous process. No, they felt that that was a significant argument that they agreed with. I'm looking now at my second column here, points of disagreement. No? Actually, parang konti lang. I have some semesters when, a lot of some of my students raise arguments, no, that they don't agree with really in the article. But dito sa inyo, wala masyado, no? Parang there are even some groups that said, we do not find ideas that we disagree with. There is some arguments that, in fact, people agreed with that I will raise questions about in a while. Like one group, in fact, said, we agree that we are active participants. Are being active participants in structures makes us sinners. I will talk about that. There was here. This is one disagreement. Now, there were two groups that talked about how they felt that personal conversion, they seemed to understand that McVery said it's not important, no? Because it's only symbolic. Because the way I understand it, these groups argued that personal conversion, in fact, is important. But I will go to this point in the course of my discussion. And I will, in fact, say, no, McVery, in fact, says that personal conversion is really important. Okay, I have a third column here, and I tried to summarize the answers of the groups. And these are on the unexamined ideological presuppositions. Sorry, this is already actually 8.2. I asked you about that, and 8.3. So this is not only 8.1, but 8.2 and 8.3. So maraming nagsabi, and I'll go back to this point, in terms of unexamined ideological presuppositions. Ano yung matingkad, no? Maraming nagsabi, ang mahirap ay mahirap dahil sila ay tamad. Yan, ito yung pangunahing lumalabas, no? Pati sa ibang semestre ko. Poor are not working hard enough. Poor do nothing about their situation. Poor are lazy and unskilled. Poor or lazy, money will be spent on drugs, etc. So it's really, if the poor are poor, it is their fault. And I will go back to that point in a while. And then some other unexamined ideological presuppositions are these solutions about the need to reform our educational system and to promote financial literacy. I've also noted here how some students already speak about how they have been able to question these unexamined ideological presuppositions. And I noted here, for example, how some of you DS students would say, I have the words here, it is a blessing for our block. These are DS people that our course allows us to immerse ourselves into the reality and to, as I understood it, to really reevaluate the way we understand the situation to transcend the unexamined ideological presuppositions. And another group, in another group, they talked about how changes, their perceptions change during their field work. So once again, I remember this was a DS group, all right? But ito meron pang isa, no? Hindi ko alam kung DS ito, pero sabi niya nagbago din yung kanyang pananaw dahil sa kanyang immersion. No? Yung nanay niya sa immersion, gumigising ng alas 3 ng umaga, no? At yun, no? Parang sinabi dun sa sinulat nila, parang hindi tama na sila ay tamad. Okay, and then my last column here has to do with 8.3 actually. And this is conversion of the heart possible? You know, I'm happy to say, lahat ng grupo nagsabi oo. At bakit posible ito? Sinabi dahil din sa core curriculum, yung mga outreach programs ng OSCI. Okay, so posible, no? Pero marami ding nagsabi, hindi ganun kadali. No? Parang, some of the words I picked up here, there are major difficulties, it depends on the student. No? There are opportunities for conversion, but it depends on the student. And some of you wrote that we shut ourselves from reality. So these are obstacles to conversion. No? Many are stubborn in their old ways. We are accustomed to our lifestyle of comfort, etc. And not enough students are opening to questioning structures. And there's mention here of especially those who just see the immersion as a requirement, etc. Yeah. And so it's really up to the student to really seize opportunities. Sige. So I just tried to sort of summarize my effort to sort of look at what you wrote and gave me. But what I'd like to do now is really focus on those points of agreement and disagreement. I will, of course, draw from what you have written here, but of course I will give it my take. No? Halimbawa, no, parang tulad ng sinabi ko, parang ilan lang yung nagbanggit, no, ng points of disagreement. But I will sort of raise certain fundamental sort of areas of disagreement with regard to the need to nuance, no, the arguments of the article. You know, what's the background for all of this? At least coming from me. No? The background, I always mention this every semester actually, and I tell my students always, not, you know, if there's one article in our reading list which if I had the time, I would want so much to rewrite. In other words, you know, I keep on saying that line because I've never had the time to do the rewriting. But it's really this article of McVery, Sin and Conversion. Bakit kamo? Why would I like to rewrite it? No? Because, first of all, I think it is a very powerful, it provides a very powerful and very useful frame, no, for us to think about political conversion. So the basic arguments of the article, no, parang I think are very useful in talking about political conversion. And yet at the same time, right, bakit ko gustong isulat ulit? Kasi parang kailangan talaga ng kulang ng nuancing, no, para sa akin yung artikulo, right? And I will talk about that in a while, all right? Sige. So what I will do now is I will start with points of disagreement. So I actually, by the way, gave out page 5 of handout 6. All right. So everything, most of what I will put in the slides now are the words on that page 5 of handout 6. So in fact, I think I would have told you before you even view this video that it is a good thing, no, to read that page 5 of handout 6 before going through this present lecture video. So I'll start with points of disagreement, and then I will, of course, end with the points of agreement. No? Why the elements of the article, which I understand to be very useful, no? Very powerful, sort of a frame that's very powerful in thinking about political conversion. Okay, so let's go to that now. No? So sisimulan ko, okay, sa points of disagreement with McVery. If you look at my page 5, there are 3 points that I will develop here. No? So yung una, and I've mentioned this already, di ba? Parang basic sort of point of disagreement and an area of improvement for the article, you might say, is it has to be really nuanced. No? There's this whole problem of, I say here, explicit or implicit one-sided black and white argumentation. So what are elements of that explicit, implicit, one-sided black and white argumentation? Una, no, so I put here the basic thesis really of Peter McVery is that you have poverty and suffering in society that is caused by structures, and these structures are imposed by the rich on the poor. That's the basic thesis. And if you sort of break up the sort of the corollary arguments, no, parang they would be these arguments. So, lahat ng balangka sa lipunan, no, mapang-ape, yung ganun. And ito, no, parang kailangan i-nuance, no. Hindi naman lahat, no, or you might say, you know, structures can be oppressive, but not entirely. No? And I'll talk about this more in a while. And then, you know, another corollary argument is, you know, in terms of these structures and their welfare effects, the rich are the oppressors, the poor are the victims. No? So, once again, we need to nuance this. No? Parang, I think I recall, no? When was this? It's quite some time, no, since we also talked about this, pero I think I must have argued in the class, no, na hindi naman, when we talk about ideas of social sin, We are not saying, no, na parang yung mga may kaya silang may kasalanan, no? At yung mga mahirap hindi sila sangkot doon sa mga katiwaliang nangyayari, no? In fact, let me just put the next point here, no, because it's related, no? Parang if the rich are the oppressors, they are also the ones that need to be converted. Pero we have argued, all right, na when it comes to social sin, bahagi din dyan. Lahat ng tao nandyan. Oh, I remember now, no, when we discussed the clarifications about what the option for the poor meant. No, I recall one of the things we talked about was it does not mean that the poor are better persons than the rich. Kasi sabi natin, no, lahat naman makasarili eh. Lahat naman gagawa ng paraan, no, na everyone is opportunistic eh. So lahat tayo sangkot dito, no, sa problemang ito. And I don't know, no, one of my reflections with the present crisis, parang in some manner, it affects everyone. Pinipinsala niya lahat ng tao, no, parang although, no, I will say na while, no, sa konteksto ng ating bansa, 'di ba? Yung epekto ng krisis, no, mas malubha, no, sa isang pagtanaw sa mga mahihirap, no? Yung gutom yung nagiging epekto sa kanila, no? Pero sa kabilang pagtanaw, di ba? This crisis, rich or poor, no? You can suffer from this crisis, yung ganun. So, yeah, I'm just really commenting on how, you know, it's not only the poor that are victims, no, when it comes to certain social outcomes. And in fact, you might even argue that in terms of the stress, no, that middle class people have to endure in terms of participating in these structures, no, they might not go hungry, you might even say, but you know, it's not as if they are having an easy time also. Okay, so in general, no, once again, I of course will argue, diba, that marginalization happens, no, and certainly people at the margins, no, carry undue burdens, pero parang yung black and white na pagtanaw, no, parang kailangan ng nuancing. Okay, and then the last point I have here, no, parang the article seems to argue walang magagawa yung mga mahirap. No? Maghihintay lang sila doon sa pagbabalik loob ng mga may kaya. At kung maalala ninyo, even when we talked about the option for the poor again, no, we argued na that in a very real way, we cannot, no, the middle class, upper class, we cannot be the saviors of the poor kasi sila mismo, no, ang kailangan kumilos para isulong yung kanilang sitwasyon. They have to be subjects of their own development. Okay, so this is my first point, no, the sort of the need to nuance the black and white argumentation of the article. All right, and this actually leads to the second and third point. No? Dito, I'd like to focus on the need for nuancing, no, with regard to the reality of social sin. All right, and dito I will in my handout, page 5, no, I add new terminology. But before I go to that new terminology, I talk about words that I've spoken about already in class. You know, when you talk about social sin in general, no, the way we understand this reality, we are referring to structures. All right. So, balikan natin, no, yung the notion of structures are sort of the default modes by which people interact with society. Very quickly, can I just go through that reflection of Father John Carroll? If without the crisis, we would have taken this article where he says, what do structures do? They basically give statuses to people. So, sabi ko, very simple example is the school system or the educational system, where someone like me, my status is teacher. And you listening to this video, you know, your students, and you know, because I am teacher, there's a certain role, no, that comes with the status. I give the material, you know, I in a normal SEM, I would give evaluations, etc. I give grades, etc. And as students, you come and you're supposed to generally sit down and keep quiet and participate in the class, and you take the exams, etc. So this is what structures do, no? Across the board. They assign statuses to people, the statuses of certain roles, and of course, no, these statuses assign positions of authority and power. They dispense benefits to people in particular ways. Okay, so in the notion of social scene that we have discussed, we're talking about how these structures, these default modes of how people relate to each other, no, they perpetuate poverty and inequality in some manner. They favor some social groups at the expense of others. Okay, now I'd like to sort of bring in this argument, and this is related to the need for nuancing, no, in the article, that social sin is not a black and white reality. And here, this is the point where I introduce some terminology, right? Kasi it is not a black and white reality in this next point I put on the slide in terms of its objective dimension. So in general, when we say objective dimension, we are referring here to, the word say, the structures themselves, no? And the degree to which they have a negative versus positive impact on the well-being of people, how they sort of affect the well-being of people. And the basic argument I'd like to bring here is, when we talk about social sin, the objective dimension of social sin is not at all black and white, all right? And ito, no, let me use as an example, guys, all right? Yung pinag-usapan ko rin noon, yung mababang sweldo ng mga manggagawa, yung pagsasamantala ng mga manggagawa. Kasi dito sa objective dimension, pag-usapan halimbawa natin, no, yung the practice of labor-only contracting. Diba? O kaya yung endo. Diba? Yung endo, yung tipong ginagawa ng mga negosyo, they hire people, for 5 months, but at the end of 5 months, because if you reach 6 months as a worker, you have to be made a regular worker and be given benefits, no, SSS, etc. So yung isang paraan na ginagawa ng mga negosyo, I don't really understand the legal nuances of this, but it is done. They hire, it's supposed to be, not legal, but it is allowed, no, given the legal framework we have, that they hire these people for 5 months, they let them go so that they will not be regularized, and then they will come back, no, and work again for 5 months. And so yun, no? Yung labor only contracting lang, hindi ko alam yung mga exact nuances nito, no, legal nuances. But what happens is you have a business firm that enters into a contract with a labor, with a sort of a service contractor who provides labor to the business, all right? So those workers now, on paper, are not employees of the business. They are employees of that service contractor. Pero sa totoo lang, sila ay nagtatrabaho, no, sa negosyong iyon. So, yung labor-only contracting kasi at yung endo, para sa akin, no, malinaw yan. Bahagi yan ng social scene. Okay? I have a background in economics, and I'm aware that in the realm of economics, the argument will be made that, that's endo or labor-only contracting is not a bad thing. No? It gives businesses, flexibility in a very competitive environment today. Diba? Unless you give businesses that flexibility, they will not survive. No? And therefore, you will have more people unemployed, etc. In fact, that's the whole argument for these arrangements, because basically, they are ways of cheapening the cost of labor, right? And so the economic argument is, unless you give businesses, you allow them to do this, they will in fact hire less workers. And if they have to pay more per worker, and this will increase unemployment, etc., etc. Okay, and I understand those economic arguments, no? But from another perspective, diba? We talked about the lack of bargaining power of laborers, diba? Ito paraan ito, no? Para gawing mas mababa yung mga sweldo ng manggagawa. Right? And here I'm thinking of some of businesses that in fact can treat their workers better, and pay better wages. No, in fact, just the idea is to make the laborers participate better, no, in the fruits of the rewards of economic production. Okay, so having said all of this, no, parang, firms today that practice endo or labor-only contracting, and these are businesses that we all know. Parang I recall last sem, a lot of my students were talking about Jollibee. Ang alam ko kasi naglabas ng listahan yung DOLE, di ba, ng mga malalaking kumpanya na nagsasagawa ng labor-only contracting, at nag-endo, no? At naalala ko doon sa listahan iyon, hindi kasama yung SM, di ba? Yung SM kilala kong gumagawa ng endo, So the article explained, another news article explained that SM had promised to regularize a certain number of the workers. Pero my point is really, parang mainstream businesses that practice endo, that practice labor-only contracting. And I'm talking here of these businesses that they can afford to give a better deal to their workers. Now, in as much as they can do that and do not, because through endo or labor-only contracting, I would regard these businesses as part of the whole reality of social scene in its objective dimension. Okay. Pero ito, hindi siya black and white. So, in other words, I'm not about to say that a business like Jollibee, I just argued earlier that they're part of the reality of social scene. They, in some manner, harm workers, they perpetuate poverty and inequality. But at the same time, I'm not about to argue, for example, that Jollibee, a company like Jollibee, is completely harmful or evil. So, Jollibee, or let's say SM, okay, SM isa pa yun, di ba, nagtitipid sa mga manggagawa, parang sa kabilang pagtanaw, hindi mo naman sasabihin pawang masama ang SM. Marami pa ring nakikinabang sa SM. And so this is what I'm talking about here, when you sort of have to nuance when you talk about the reality of structures, that in some manner perpetuate poverty, inequality. You can argue that they do, but not to the point where you say they are completely harmful, completely oppressive, completely. But that's the sort of nuancing that I think is important when we talk about social scene. Mind you, there are some structures that have no saving grace. Just top of mind, I'm thinking of the structures of the Holocaust, in World War II, where the Nazis were killing off the Jews, right? That has no saving grace. There's no goodness in that structure at all. But for the most part, in my understanding, when we talk about the reality of structures today, that are part of this reality of social scene, as much as they benefit some social groups at the expense of others, they are not completely harmful or evil. I'm just thinking of the crisis now also, and you look at how government has tried to respond to it. And once again, maraming reklamo sa gobyerno, parang gano'n. Pero sa isang banda, kung at least dito sa amin, sa barangay namin, makikita mo kung paano nagsisikap na gumawa ng paraan sa krisis ngayon. So, yan, may mga katiwalian sa gobyerno, pero may bahagi pa rin sa mga taong nasa gobyerno na tapat sa tungkulin, at nagsisikap na maglingkod sa bayan. Okay. let me go to the second part of this discussion. So when you look at the subjective dimension, once again, there's a need for nuancing in terms of this is now, are people culpable now when they participate in structures that somehow perpetuate poverty and inequality. And dito yung gusto kong gamiting halimbawa, no, yung nakasanayan kong gamiting halimbawa, yung yung buong problema sa Nike at syempre hindi lang Nike yan, ha. I was trying to read about this a little these past days. No? Yung parang you have this fast fashion now, and this is the whole problem of how these mainstream companies, no, on a global level, you know, they use labor in developing countries, low-cost labor, and these are sweatshops, no, parang. So the example I'd like to use here is Nike, right? In the 90s, you know, they had this. There was this whole advocacy against Nike kasi lumabas yung katotohanan na halimbawa meron silang factories, no, were in Indonesia, for example, na sweatshop, no, parang sobrang mababa sweldo, hindi maayos yung paggawaan, yung kung saan sila nagtatrabaho, etc. At gumagamit ng child labor, no, yung ganun tipo. Okay. Ngayon ito, no, parang ang gusto kong gamitin halimbawa dito, halimbawa bumili ka ng Nike. Okay? And you know, if we had a class, I would sort of draw out much of this through a discussion in class, but in some manner what I'll do now is I'll just bring in the conclusions of those discussions that I have had with my classes in the past. So I would give the example of someone, a father, who buys a pair of Nike shoes, no, para sa kanyang anak na mahilig sa basketball. Okay? At yung unang antas ng halimbawa ko, sasabihin ko, halimbawa, binili niya yung Nike na hindi pa lumalabas, no, itong buong issue ng paggamit ng Nike ng sweatshops. So, kumbaga, nangyayari na yung problema, pero tago pa, no, yung ganun tipo. And this father, all right, dahil mahusay yung, and let's say ito, working class father ito, di ba? So, hindi ito yung tipong, okay, anak, gusto mo ng Nike ito, maglalabas na yan ng pera mula sa pitaka ito, bili ka, punta ka na dyan, bili ka ng, hindi, no? Ito yung tipong tatay na kailangan niyang mag-ipon. Anak, pag-ipunan natin yan, pero dahil mahusay ka sa basketball, aba, bibilhan kita ng Nike, yung ganun tipo. And in this first example I gave with regard to this, you know, there's no news at all, no, about how Nike is using sweatshops and child labor. Hindi pa lumalabas yung issue. Early 90s or somewhere there. And my question is, you know, is the father culpable? Strictly speaking, if you read McVeary, okay, he will say yes. You know, parang the very fact that the father is part of the structure, you know, that uses, this is Nike using sweatshops, di ba? Aba, bahagi yung tatay dyan, di ba? Kasi syempre, those sweatshops would not exist, no, unless people bought the products of Nike, yung ganun tipo. Okay. But, okay, I bring out this whole sort of layer of need for nuancing. In my understanding, in traditional moral theology, one of the requirements for culpability is knowledge. And when that is absent, parang hindi alam ng tatay, no? At dito, no, I always emphasize, guys, no, this is not culpable ignorance, no? Yung culpable ignorance kasi, nangyayari sa harapan mo, ayaw mo lang makita. Nandiyan na sa harapan mo, hindi ayaw mo lang makita. Ito, the father really has no, is not trying to be ignorant. Pero wala talagang information at all on the oppressive labor conditions that produce the shoe that he wants, that he, let's say he buys for his son. Right? So I will argue we have to nuance, no? culpability of people because of their lack of knowledge with regard to the harm that the structure is inflicting on people. Now, the second level of the discussion here, let's say the father knew about it, okay? And so I would sort of uh, uh, specify my example a little bit more, okay? Let's say ito, no, uli, yung tatay meron siyang anak, mahusay mag-basketball. Diba? Gusto niyang bilhan ng Nike para parang baka maging varsity team yung anak at kailangan niya ng magandang sapatos, no, para maabot niya yung layunin iyon. Pero ulit, working class father. Ha? So sabi niya, anak, kailangan kong mag-ipon. Pero gusto kong gagawa ako ng paraan. Bibilang kita ng Nike. Ayan. So sabi niya, anak, okay, let's say that the son is 4th year. No? Anak, sige, pag magtapos ka ng high school, let's say grade 12, all right? Pag magtapos ko ng high school, ireregalo ko yan sa'yo, no, yung Nike. Okay, so yan, talagang nagsikap ng tatay para mag-ipon, no, bumili ng mamahaling Nike. Pero ito yung nangyari, no? Let's say, maybe a week or so before graduation. So, yan, bibili na sana yung tatay ng Nike, di ba? Kasi ireregalo niya sa araw ng pagtatapos ng anak. Doon pumutok yung balita. No? So the media now is full of these news items on the whole the problem of sweatshops of Nike and how they give low wages to their work. These are people who work to make Nike shoes in developing countries, and the whole problem even of child labor, etc. So now the father knows, right? And he has to make a decision. Will he still buy the Nike? And so this is the usual sort of discussion point, exercise that I try to present to students, and so I ask, mali ba kung bumili sa halimbawang iyon, kung bumili ng Nike para sa anak ni tatay? Yan. And I always get sort of a whole range of answers, right? From, some people will say, sir, hindi naman, di ba? Kasi malinaw, parang para sa anak niya, di ba? Parang may obligasyon din siya sa anak niya, yung ganun tipo. Okay? But of course, I would also get the other side, no, of the understanding, no, that sir, malinaw, mali yun, di ba? Kasi uli, no, hindi naman maikakaila pag bumili ang tatay ng Nike para sa anak niya. Aba, bahagi na siya, no, ng problema ng pagsamantala dun sa mga manggagawang gumagawa ng Nike. When you buy a pair of Nike shoes, you're telling what are you telling the company? No? You're telling Nike, tuloy niya yan, no? Pabor ako dyan, di ba? Parang I'm voting for that. It's a consumer vote. Eh. Tuloy niya yan. And so, yeah, no, that's the other side of the argument, diba? That the person certainly is culpable and should in fact not buy. So the discussion also goes to, so what's the response? No? And some people would say, boycott. Yeah? Parang you have to hurt the company and make it feel that it's doing something wrong para baguhin niya yung kanyang pamamalakad. But I've always had business students who would say, sir, boycott's not really the answer. Diba? Kasi it will hurt the workers in the end. No? There will be less production and the workers will lose their jobs, etc. So they have, these students have commented, no, that you have to start an advocacy, that join an advocacy that will pressure Nike to change its labor practices. Okay, and I used to use this example, guys, because I thought it was a positive example. No? Because in my understanding, that is what happened. In the late 90s, Nike was forced to admit, no, that there was this problem. At first, they tried to deny it, but then they had to admit that there was this problem of, the sweatshops, etc. And so this is the effect of this consumer advocacy, you know, to make Nike accountable. And I previously had thought that it was a good example because then Nike was forced to reform, etc. But over the past SAMs, I've really been alerted by my students in different ways, that the problem still continues today. In my understanding, the whole problem is because Nike will just argue we are not accountable. Kasi what they do is they have service contractors in these countries, and then there's another layer where these service contractors subcon the work to another layer of contractors. No? So parang sa legal na antas, and parang pwedeng maghugas kamay yung Nike na we're not the ones implementing this low wages, etc. And we try to as much as possible promote fair wages, etc., living wages, etc. So anyway, the long and short of it, guys, is this problem, in my understanding, is still very real today. And I've had some students who've talked about the fast fashion industry, yung mga these brands like Zara or H&M, Uniqlo, mga ganyan. Lahat ng mga kumpanyang ito, parang talagang yung kanilang business model, kumbaga, really results in this low wages of exploitation of laborers. Pero balik ako sorry dun sa mali ba na kung yung tatay ay bumili ng Nike para sa kanyang anak. Okay. Ako sa, again, this is another point of view that comes out of the discussion. Parang some people would say, the father in fact has an obligation to educate the son. And sabihin sa anak, di ba? Parang tipong, anak, ito yung nangyayari. Anak, parang bili na lang tayo ng, yung tipong bili na lang tayong Adidas. Pero I stop myself with that example because Adidas is seems to be caught in the same business model, etc. Pero it's the responsibility of the father to educate the son and to explore alternatives. And ako mismo, I would say in the end that I would be such a father. Yeah? Parang sasabihin ko sa anak ko, anak, ito yung problema, di ba? Parang, and sige, tingnan natin, baka meron pang ibang sapatos, di ba? Pero ito, this is my sort of call of conscience. I myself would not, I would not condemn a different father who felt obligated to fulfill a promise that he made to his son. In other words, in the hypothetical example I gave, kung yung tatay na yun, 1 week before graduation, di ba? Alam niyang nangako siya sa anak niya, bibili siya ng Nike at bagamat lumabas yung balita, halimbawa, for 1 week, this news has come out already, previous to the point where the father was about to buy the pair of the Nike shoes. And if that father, that hypothetical father said, hindi, I understand the problem, di ba? Pero ito para sa anak ko ito, bibiling ko ito, yung parang sa akin, parang it's hard to sort of say, mali yan, that man is a sinner. So what I'm bringing in here, guys, is really how it's not black and white when we look at culpability for participating in social sin. Because of varying levels of lack of knowledge and varying levels of lack of intention to harm people. And I don't know, just the other example that comes to my mind now, yung tipong pupunta ka sa SM, parang, yeah, uh, talk about SM, you know, practicing endo and bahagi ito ng, as much as it does that, and you know, you would argue that a firm, a business like SM, they can treat their workers better, no? So yun, no, parang dapat siguro i-boycott yung SM, yung ganun tipo. Pero ako, aminin ko, no, parang at certain points, di ba? Parang for electronic products, we go to SM Marikina, or sometimes perhaps my wife would want to watch a movie. So yun, no? Parang pupunta ka pa rin sa SM, di ba? So uli, no? Parang there's a voice in me that says, you know, Jim, you have to be authentic, no, when you talk about these things to students. Bakit ka pa pumupuntang SM, no? Paminsan-minsan yung ganun tipo. Pero yun, no, parang my conscience at this point tells me, of course, no, I am against you know, yung pagtitipid sa mga manggagawa. Pero yun, no, malinaw, no, hindi ko yung ginugusto. But not to the point that I will completely boycott SM. Okay, I'm very, in some manner, being very transparent here in the way I try to think out this moral, this moral situation. Okay, mahaba na, no? Pupunta na ako sa sumunod na punto, no? The last point here, points of disagreement, and once again, this is has to do with that whole need for nuancing, right? McVery seems to make it appear in his article that conversion involves, you know, completely turning around. The person that comes to mind is like the Saint Francis of Assisi. Parang very dramatic. He rejects the inheritance from his father and lives poor among the poor. I will always say, you know, that's a wonderful vocation, very powerful witness to the gospel. But in some manner, no, parang it's not for everyone. No? In fact, for most, if not all of us, no, in the class, parang, hindi yan ang vocation natin. And we have in fact argued it is not necessary, no, to turn away completely. No? I put here, we do not have to give up all desire for a certain material stability, right? So hindi kailangan to not participate in mainstream businesses and all. And here I recall now that we did not discuss this in the class, but I sort of talked about it in general terms, where someone like Father Ben, in the way I would understand him, would say, no, precisely, no. The challenge is to enter into these structures and to transform them from within, rather than sort of cutting ourselves off from them in that sort of thing. Okay, so these are points of disagreement, no, with McVery. What I'd like to do now, and yeah, I'm not sure how much time I have left, no, but maybe I have about 5 minutes. I'd like to start points of agreement here, right? So let me move to that. Maybe I can touch on the first 2 points here. I have 4 points here. Maybe the first 2, and then I'll do the last 2 in the last part of this discussion of the balanced spirituality, together with talking a little about the interrelatedness. But let me begin with these points of agreement. So as I mentioned, some groups talked about this, the whole notion that conversion is not a one-time, big-time thing. It's a continuous, lifelong process. And dito sa conversion to justice ni McVery, no, he identifies 3 moments in this lifelong, continuous process, right? And this is sort of my take now on McVery's frame. I argue that I remain faithful to the basic ideas that he presents, but I sort of give it my own points of emphasis, nuance. No? So he speaks about conversion of the feet. Ano ito, no? Ito yung bagong karanasan. Okay, at dito ang binibigyan kong diin ay merong pagtagpo dito, no? Tao sa tao na pakikipagtagpo. So the element of this new experience is really human encounter, right? And it is really this context of this call to have a dialogue of life, to have some personal connectedness, no, with those at the margins of society. Okay, at this point, the thought that enters in my mind now is that, and this is one of the things I would have tried to test your understanding with, if we had some sort of evaluation in class. I would ask, what is the relationship of conversion to justice of McFerry with the pastoral cycle? And the correct answer to that question is, they actually describe the same process. And I say that now because this conversion of the feet is like the first moment of the pastoral cycle, the moment of experience, all right? That moment where we are called to some form of uh, being with, no? Being connected with those at the margins. All right, and then let's move on. No? Sorry, this is important. No? Yung conversion of the feet, it's all about changing the human context of our lives. Um, you can apply this even now, guys, with the COVID-19 crisis na tipong for many of us, we are stuck in our homes and, parang it can remain at that level, no? Parang our experience of this crisis can just be the reality that yung mga lugar na gusto natin puntahan, hindi natin napupuntahan, etc. Pero, yung sinasabi ng conversion of the feet, and of course, this is not exactly a right argument because we cannot go out and be with the people, let's say in the communities, no, they've lost their sources of income. Pero ang puntong gusto ko lang ipalabas dito ay yung tawag ng conversion of the feet, yung lawakan natin yung buhay natin. Okay, sa halimbawa sa crisis ngayon, no, isipin natin hindi lang yung ating pagkakulong sa bahay, pero isipin natin yung mga nasa komunidad, no, na gutom. Okay, dahil wala silang hanap buhay. Halimbawa, kasi dito sa aming bahay, di naman kami nagugutom. Ha? Yan. So, sometimes I remind my children, parang, okay, parang try to sort of open yourselves to the reality, the wider reality that's happening in our country today, where people are going hungry. Yung ganun tipo. So, nasa klase sabi ko, di ba, dapat yung mundo natin, hindi lang bahay, eskwelahan, mall. Di ba? Masyadong makitid. No? Ito yung hinihiling sa atin ng conversion of the feet. No? Lawakan natin yung ating buhay at yung paraan dito ay yung tuwirang pagbabad. Yung tipong we argued before, no? You don't have to live in payatas, to practice the option for the poor. But, the dialogue of life, those moments where we try to enter directly into the reality of people at the margins in order to feel their situation and understand better their situation. This is what is at stake here with conversion of the faith. Okay. And then, the second moment for McFerry's conversion of the head. Ito siguro mas maikli lang. I just like to make a clarification that when we speak of conversion of the head, we are not just talking here of, parang isip lang, no? Kasi para sa akin, itong conversion of the head, these are moments of insight, I say here. They involve our head, our thinking, but they're also very much an affective experience. We are actually moved and inspired by some insight. This is how I understand conversion. And this conversion of that, when you look at the pastoral cycle, this would really be the moment of social analysis, the second and the third, and the moment of theological reflection, where we are able to understand more the reality and see it in a new light because of the social sciences, right? And we are able to sort of bring in values now, human values. What is at stake in terms of human values? And that's the moment of theological reflection. And then finally, okay, in the frame of McVery, there's conversion of the heart. In my understanding, what differentiates now this last moment with the, let's say, the one that preceded it, the conversion of the head, is really, these are now when we translate insight into decisions we make or actions we take. Right? So sinasabi ko dito, the conversion of the heart involves moments of decision making. We make certain decisions and we act in a certain way. Okay? So itong conversion of feet, head, heart, hindi ito isang ikot lang, no? Tapos na. Di ba? Kasi continuous lifelong process nga. Kailangan, di ba, sa klase sinabi ko itong pastoral cycle, halimbawa, it's just another way of talking about conversion to justice. Aba, sabi ko, kailangan ulit-ulitin natin to, di ba? Dapat hindi ito magtapos sa TH1 for 1, hindi ito dapat magtapos sa pagiging estudyante sa Ateneo para dun sa mga fourth year, no, na graduating. Aba, kailangan may paraan, no, na patuloy nating isagawa ito, no, sa ating buhay. And ito yung sinabi ko, kung may gusto, maraming paraan. Kung ayaw, no, maraming dahilan. Diba? And I recall I used I would use the example of my father-in-law, who was a corporate man in all of his career, his work, right? But he had this Sunday apostolate where he became very active in the parish, no, del Estrada. And so this was his conversion of the feet. No? Pupunta siya sa mga komunidad. And now that he's retired, no, this is actually the joy of his life, that he has used his banking skills, no, to help build up the cooperative here in Del Estrada and beyond. Yun. So, corporate work setting, yun ang trabaho niya. Pero yun, may Sunday apostolate. No? You know, for some of you, it might be you work for the government perhaps, and your work will really bring you to touch base with communities in far-flung areas. I do not know, but I argue here that this conversion of the feet, head, and heart is something that we must all practice in some manner in our lives. And see, the last point here is really, I speak about the primacy of the conversion of the feet, which is what really drives the conversion process. That recourse always to some form of human encounter, some form of dialogue of life, some form of personal connectedness to people at the margin. So, you know, going back to the crisis today, now perhaps if you cannot be there directly, no? Like because we are in our homes, you know, at the very least, no, we should try to tune in, no, to what's happening by watching 24 oras or TV Patrol. No? Halimbawa, naalala ko kagabi, no, parang there was may balita, no, tungkol dito. Kinakausap yung isang jeepney driver. Walang pasada, di ba? Walang kita eh. So, ang pinakita dun sa balita ay naroon siya, no, kasama ng pamilya niya, nakatira sa kanyang jeepney. Sobrang lungkot sa isang banda. So, ito, no, parang kung hindi nangyayari yung crisis ngayon, mahalaga yung mga sandaling iyon na kahit paano dumadalaw tayo, no, nakikipagtagpo tayo dito sa mga kapwa-tao nating nasa laylayan para mas higit natin madama, no? Mas maging malay tayo, no, sa kanilang sitwasyon. Okay, I'm thinking I should end at this point, no? Because mahaba na itong ginawa kong video. So in the next video, I will actually develop the last 3 points of agreement, and then I will conclude. I will talk a little about the interrelatedness of the 3 dimensions.